So you're here today to learn about implicit bias and the power of peer support. And this is, like I said, this really dives deeper into my doctoral research. And I actually did a pilot study on this. So I am really excited. And I'm going to go over our learning objectives for today. What are our learning objectives? And this is the logistical piece. We have to have these for you to get your CE credits. And just a reminder, we are approved for ACE, which is social work, continuing ed, and NBCC, continuing ed credits. So FYI, at the end, we will tell you how you can get your CE credits for this, for attending today. So here's our learning objectives. Identify at least 2 ways implicit bias can influence clinical decision-making and client interactions. Apply peer support strategies to increase self-awareness and accountability in recognizing personal biases. And then the third is to demonstrate the ability to engage in constructive dialogue with peer groups to reflect on and challenge implicit assumptions in practice. Okay, so I'm not going to read this here. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Megan Mitchell. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm also a registered play therapist. I own my own private practice in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Brain Space Wellness. My work is mostly with children, teens, young adults. However, I have interests in a lot of different places. So that's my clinical work. Why is this topic important to me? As I had been doing my work, I've been in the field for over a decade. I was noticing there was a lack of discussion around biases, around those hard conversations, I think, of where our biases lie, microaggressions, marginalization of clients within clinical supervision specifically. I was not getting that myself in clinical supervision. I talked to other people and they're like, yeah, we talk about cases, but we don't really bring in that cultural piece into the discussion. So that is where I really got interested in diving a little bit deeper. So what we're going to talk about today is how can you bring these hard topics into session? How can you approach this with your clients? And we'll talk a little bit more about why it's not talked about, why there's some barriers to that. But basically, my goal is to get these conversations happening so that our marginalized populations, our clients that have been historically marginalized, are getting the best clinical care possible. Additionally, I wear many hats. This is more in my macro role. I'm the founder of Agents of Change Social Work Test Prep. Many of you may have heard about it, and we have moved into continuing ed in the last few years. So we are really, really excited to just be a place where clinicians and social workers and mental health professionals can connect. Okay, so what is cultural competency? Just in the chat, how many of you have obviously heard the word cultural competency, but how many of you have taken or for your licensure have to take a cultural competency course for CEs? You can just raise your hand in the chat or just put it. Most states have moved to having, the term is actually cultural competency. So what is cultural competency? This is a framework that the profession is really works from. And I am going to here say that I think it's a little bit of an outdated framework. So what is cultural competency? It's where we take a training, usually it's a one-time, once a year, once every 3 years training, where we learn different assumptions about cultures. And in this model, it assumes that we're acquiring information, we're learning skills to work with certain populations, to reduce cultural friction, to be more aware, to be more competent, that's where the word comes from, in working with clients from diverse backgrounds, okay? What is problematic about cultural competency and what I'm going to push back on this framework is no one can be the expert in someone else's culture. You can have knowledge on it, but this doesn't come from a place of curiosity. Right? This is, oh, I learned some skills, I'm going to apply it. And I think with culture, you have to approach it with wonder, curiosity, and every single person is going to present differently. So the movement now is cultural competency is not cutting it. And we're moving more to cultural humility. How many of you have heard the term cultural humility? Raise your hand or just put it in the chat if you've heard this term. Yes, like we are moving more towards cultural humility work, which I like to see. So what is cultural humility? Cultural humility is being humble, right? We are not the experts on someone else's experiences, their own journey, their own identity. And within cultural humility, we have to take a look at ourselves. We hold privilege, we hold power, we have our own biases, and we cannot treat clients that have different backgrounds from us if we're not doing the work ourselves, right? So I want you today to think, so maybe you've taken a cultural competency training. I want you today to just start to shift your thinking to how can I approach people from different backgrounds with an open mind, with a curiosity. And there might be a lot of internal work that we have to do to be curious and show up and be mindful and accountable for the privileges that we hold. So I'm all about cultural humility, and I really dove a lot deeper in my doctoral work. So that's kind of where that comes from. Okay, so a little bit more here. Hold on, let me just get my dashboard in a way that I can see the slides. Okay, perfect. What is implicit bias? Implicit bias are those different ideals, values, thought processes that we hold. Oftentimes we do not do it consciously. They could be due to the way we were raised or where we are in our life, our own experiences. But it does interpret how we interpret clients' narratives, behaviors, clinical presentations. What does this lead to? This may lead to some missed communication, some misattunement, misinterpreted ways of thinking about things. Also, what can this lead to? Misdiagnosis, right? How many times have you had clients say, I've gone to several clinicians and I felt like they just totally missed the mark, right? That probably is due to some misattunement, some misalignment in the client experience. And we might not even know it because we are just conditioned certain ways that we might be making clinical assumptions or clinical decisions based on our own assumptions or our own life experiences instead of really working alongside the client to dive into their lived experiences. So what I learned in all of this research is we as mental health professionals think we are really, really good at being culturally competent, right? Which for the compared to the general population, that's probably true, right? We probably are much more aware of cultural competencies and differences. However, when you actually ask clients, have you experienced a microaggression? Do you feel your clinician is in tune with you? Does your clinician ask about identity and approach from a place of curiosity? The results show that we are actually missing the mark more than we think, if that makes sense. And a lot of clinicians, when I did a huge needs assessment, I did interviews, a lot of clinicians actually said they avoid talking about identity, background topics in session because they feel maybe uncomfortable. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to offend my client. There might be this elephant in the room that I don't want to address. And what I dived even deeper into is, do you talk about this in supervision? And a lot of clients, it was a rare instance if culture, identity, power dynamics, implicit bias was discussed in supervision. Why else do clinicians not talk about this or dive into trainings on it? How many of you are billable hours? I don't have time in my day maybe to sit and do these reflections or do the deep work, right? My agency doesn't give me time to attend a training. So like you just being here today is a huge step, and this is really great for your development. Also, why are we not talking about these topics? A lot of times we think we took this training, we took this cultural competency, CE, it was a half day. I did what I need to do. Instead of it being framed as more of this is a long time ongoing practice that I need to do frequently. So I will just pose this question to the group. How many of you often get supervision, and this could be from a clinical supervisor, this could be a peer group supervision or a consult. How many of you often, I would say every time you're meeting, and go deeper into identity work, or talk about biases, identity, and power dynamics in clinical work? It's probably much fewer than we think. Not as often as we should, right? So that's really what got me thinking. I saw it as a missed opportunity. I wanted someone in the clinical space to be there to talk about that work with me. So that's why I was like, we need to address this, right? Okay. And I'm seeing in the chat, right? Like hardly ever, it's rare. And what I'm gonna try to challenge today is we need to do this more, right? So I'm gonna give you some tips of how you can do it, how you can have these conversations, how you can ask for it. Okay. Okay, why do we need this? So we know that these stats, but just kind of honing in on the facts here, mental health disparities exist even stronger and more persistently for clients from marginalized communities because there's systematic barriers, right? They may have an increased exposure to trauma. There's systems at play for that. Okay. What else is why this work of cultural humility important? Cultural competency, what we talked about at the beginning, it ignores power dynamics. It reinforces stereotypes. How many of you have taken a cultural competency course where they say, when working with clients who are from African American backgrounds, this is what you should expect? That's not cutting it. Why? Because it's reinforcing stereotypes, and it's just assuming that every client group behaves in a certain way. And what cultural humility does is it really focuses on the individual's experience. Okay. Someone said, yes, I feel like the social work licensing exam does this. Yes, right. You have to learn these kind of cultural competency terms and whatnot. And it's just it's not clinically the best way to meet clients where they're at. Books do that too. Absolutely. Okay. Clinicians also reported that they don't have the time to engage in this, right? I want to do this work, but I just don't have a safe space to do this. A lot of clinicians also reported, I don't feel comfortable having these conversations with my supervisor or my coworkers because I don't work in a very supportive environment where I feel comfortable saying these things. Why is this work important? Without doing this, clients are going to continue to experience microaggressions and harm in therapy. Okay. Misdiagnoses happen. We know that this can lead to a lot of racial discrepancies. It's going to worsen mental health outcomes when misdiagnoses happen. Clinicians that engage in this work actually have improved client outcomes. The clients feel that they are able to make more progress when this work happens, and it goes towards all of those values that we have as mental health professionals. Okay. So, this is a little bit more about the work that I did in my doctoral program. I took all this feedback, and what did I find? We're lacking this, right? I just asked you all, how many of you are talking about these issues in supervision or weekly or in case conceptualization, case consultation? Many people said no. So based on my own experience and all this feedback from clinicians, there's not a safe space for this across the board. Supervision's often ignoring these things: identity, bias, systematic power dynamics. Also, sometimes people were reporting the supervision dynamic is a power dynamic in itself, right? So that was problematic, right? I'm in a power dynamic. I don't feel comfortable talking about a power dynamic. Microaggressions and clinical harm in therapy settings do occur. Oftentimes, it's not because we as clinicians want to harm our clients in any way. It's subconsciously, it is because there's miscues, there's misalignment, and we're not asking those hard questions. Okay. I believe the stat is 81% of minority clients report in the therapeutic setting that they have experienced at least one microaggression. That was a shocking number to me. Like, so most minority clients are experiencing microaggressions in the therapeutic relationship. And I was like, whoa, we got to address this. What else did I do in this work is I created a virtual peer model. So virtual, it's called virtual peer group supervision. And what I'll explain more about what this was, but it was a group, there was no power dynamic. I was not leading it. I was a member of the group, and we talked about cases, we did screeners, we talked about the hard things, we addressed the elephants in the room, and this was to support safety, accountability, and self-awareness. So there we like put all of those hard conversations out there in the open, and we addressed them. Okay, so when I say VPGS, that's what I'm going to refer to, just because it's a mouthful. Virtual peer group supervision. What was this? It was a group of peers. Everyone was licensed, but at different levels. So there was some master's level clinicians, there was some clinically licensed clinicians, and this was for research purposes. Varying degrees of experience. Some people had 1 year of experience. There was some people in the group that had 25 years of experience. So that power dynamic was really erased, right? No one took a seat as the expert. We were just there to learn from each other and to talk to each other as colleagues. None of us also worked at the same agency. The participants really reported that they really enjoyed that. They're like, I didn't feel like I had to act a certain way in front of my colleagues. Or a lot of people said a lot of the gossip was taken out of, because sometimes in work settings, like, it became very cliquey in the supervision, or there was a lot of gossip, right? So these were just different dynamics we tried to address or neutralize that power dynamic. So why did I choose this? All those questions or feelings you have wanted to say out loud, but you never felt you could, we talked about in this space. Just show of hands in the chat. How many times have you wanted to approach something in supervision clinically, and you're just like, I don't feel comfortable, I don't feel confident saying it? It's happened to me many, many times. I didn't think it would be, I didn't think it would land with respect. Maybe there was a power dynamic. Maybe I didn't feel trusting. It's very vulnerable to talk about these things, right? So a lot of people are like, yes, this is a problem, right? And then some of you are saying, I can talk about anything with my supervisor. Those are the relationships we want. Those are like few and far between, and those are gems. Please, please, please hold on to those relationships. So those are great if you have those, right? But oftentimes we are just assigned a supervisor. We don't get to talk to peers. And I've had some excellent supervision in the 13 years I've been doing this, and I've had some really subpar supervision. I remember both very equally. I remember when it was really bad, and I remember when it was really strong. Okay. What is this virtual peer group supervision? What's a little bit more about it? It was online once a week, and we met virtually via Zoom. And what it was meant to foster honest peer-led reflection. It was peer-to-peer. What were we doing specifically in this? We were identifying and challenging biases, creating accountability. So we created resources together. We had a shared drive. We were sending resources. And what we were trying to do is reduce the likelihood of perpetuating bias. We were all committed to the same thing here. Okay. What else did we have? We had a safe space. We supported and addressed those power imbalances, right? These inherently exist, and we didn't shy away from them. We called out when there was, right? It was a very mixed group of people, racially, socioeconomically, geographically. And we called that out when there was areas where we were all educated women, right? It was a group of all women. So we called that out. We talked about that. What does that mean for our work with clients? And then we were accountable to each other in a safe and supportive place. So we were really just there to learn and to discuss and do better. Okay. Virtual peer group supervision is evidence-based. It was peer-led, and there was a format that we followed. Okay. It was called the Please model. You can research it, but basically it was that someone presents a case, we open the floor for discussion, and we also did a reflection every week as well, which I'll talk about a little bit more. We worked from the multicultural orientation framework. And what this is really what we talked about a lot with that cultural humility. It talks about cultural humility, being humble in our interactions with clients, cultural opportunities. So, were there ever opportunities where we could approach something with a client and we didn't? And then this is a big one. How comfortable did we feel talking about these things? It's going to be different for everyone, and it's going to vary based on a lot of different things. So, would you feel comfortable having some of these discussions with clients? Okay. Evidence supports that when you have a strong peer network, so we're not talking about just a supervisor and a supervisee, we're talking about peer consultation. So you are with a group of peers. It is effective in building skills, and it is effective in reducing burnout. Okay. Someone said, what about a client who has microaggressions towards the clinician? That this would be a space where you could discuss that and how you might actually approach that. Do you approach that with the client? Some of those things did come up. My client has I can see my client has implicit bias, or biases they hold or values they hold based on this. My research actually also occurred right during the election. So that just happened to be. So we were able to, in that space, process, like, I have clients coming in from both sides in both political parties, and people in the group, including myself, are having clients come in wanting to talk about it. How do we approach this without having our own biases shine through? How do I sit here when I'm holding on to these like strong feelings myself? So it was really a wonderful experience where everyone was able to come as they are and say those hard things. Like, there was some people that came and we were just like, you know what? It is really hard to be a clinician right now. For you all, how many of you had a hard time clinically during the election period? It was a very tough time for people. There was such high feelings, all of this. Like I said, this just happened to be when we were meeting, but that was like a time that we were able to safely talk about these things. Okay, so it's still happening, right? So like, these conversations are important, and we were very raw, we were vulnerable, and some of us were very angry, right? A lot of feelings were coming up, and we were discussing, how do I stay grounded and still stay present for my clients? Okay. We're going to talk a little bit now about identity. When you are conceptualizing working with a client, it's really important that you are understanding, thinking about, observing, being curious about their identity and intersections of their identity. What does intersection mean? Intersectionality means that different identities can exist at the same time. So here are some different identities that when we were discussing clients or our own stuff that was coming up around clients, we were taking these into account. Gender identity, sexual orientation, ethnic and racial identity, religious and cultural identity, disability identity, political and ideological identity, body size or appearance, generational and subcultural identity, family relationships or identity. I think oftentimes we pick up on the big ones, right? I'm thinking of racial identity, sexual orientation, gender identity. We went even deeper, and we went into some of these less talked about identities. So I just want you to take a look at these identities here on the screen. What are some that like you really don't think about when you're conceptualizing clients' cases often? Body size, political, right? Political came up very much more so last year for me in my work. And I work with kids, teens, and young adults, and it was coming up. Disability is one that often people don't oftentimes if people have a visible disability, it comes up, but there are many hidden disabilities that come up that people don't conceptualize things. Generational, subcultures. I work with a lot of kids and teens. They some of them very much identify with being like into gaming. I am a gamer, right? That's an identity that I explore with them. Some people are very much like, I am a millennial. I very much feel that that is part of my identity. It's going to be different for everyone. Appearance, religious and cultural identity. Sometimes we shy away from talking about that. Family and relationship identity. Everyone has a different value system. Everyone has a different relationship with their family system. Some people's blood family isn't who they identify as someone that is part of their family. So economic identity too, right? Like, I have worked in many different settings, and socioeconomic and wealth, wherever someone comes from, definitely may have an influence on what you're seeing clinically. So these are just things that we put out there in our case consultations to think about, which was really helpful as a reminder that there's more than just a couple identities, and they often intersect. Someone might identify as a female that is leans more conservative and also has a physical disability, right? Those are three identities that are important to them that we would need to address. Okay. People have multiple layers of identity. So what I encourage you to do when you're working with clients is appropriately talk with clients more about what these different layers are. Maybe you don't get to it right away in the therapeutic relationship, but there is time and space to do that. Okay. Biases are not isolated, they combine. So when we're not looking at how being someone that is not able-bodied, also they might be a person of color, how do those intersect? What we need to be attuned to these intersections because we don't want to cause clinical harm. Okay. What do we do with this? We need to be self-aware first. So even just answering those questions for me, like, which of these do you not think about that often? That's being aware. Where are our strengths? Where are areas where we need to be a little bit more tuned in and a little bit more, put a little bit more of our awareness to? When we can better recognize our biases, our weak spots, we can approach it with better empathy and decision making. Okay. Also, when clinicians ask these questions in appropriate ways, they strengthen their rapport. We're reducing those microaggressions. We're creating safe spaces, and that's going to help the therapeutic relationship. Okay. You can feel free to share this in the chat, or it can just be a personal reflection. But something I want you to think about right now is which of your own identities might influence how you interpret a client's story. So just think about that. I think of, some of my experiences. I was raised by a single mom, so I definitely have biases around two-parent households. I didn't come from that. I am college educated. Some of my clients are not. I probably have biases there. Political, right? A lot of times with social media and just general the way politics are right now, a lot of times our opinions exist in an echo chamber, and we surround ourselves with people who think a lot like us. We maybe don't see people that politically vary from us. Yeah, people are saying a lot of really important things here. Just like things of your own identities that might affect how you interpret a client's story. Okay, just things to think about. And what I'm proposing and what we did in that peer group consultation, peer group supervision group, is we talked about these things. I have been doing this work for a long time, and I've never had a space where I could talk about that. It was very, very, very liberating to have a space where everyone was on the same page and wanting to talk about those things and be open and be vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable space to have to talk about this. So I just thank you all for coming today and being vulnerable in sharing and just wanting to learn, right? You're here, that shows that you're interested. And that is the first step. Okay, there is a scale that I'm going to stop. Actually, let me see. I will pull it up at the end. I am going to share this with you all. It is called the Multidimensional Cultural Humility Scale. I used it in my research, and what we did in my research is we took the scale at the beginning before doing virtual peer group consultation and supervision, and then we went through, our months together, and we took one at the end. There was really great results. There was clinically significant results. But what was most important, that's great that things were clinically significant in improving how aware people were, is the clinicians said just even engaging in a screener to see where I fell with my work in implicit biases and cultural humility, I am more aware now. So the self-awareness, I think, was the most effective piece. So it's a fairly new tool, right? How many times do we have these screeners out there that are 20, 30 years old? This one's less than 5 years old, which is great. Because this cultural humility idea is really starting to take off. People are starting to dive deeper into it and talk about it more. So this scale was used, and what I'm going to share it with you. I encourage you to use it in your own work. If you are a supervisor, use it with your supervisees, use it for yourself, use it for whatever way it will help you really identify some of your areas of strength and weakness. And why was this measure created? The person who created it wanted to have a more nuanced approach to cultural humility, right? There's implicit biases tests out there, but this was really a self-reflection tool to help people just see where they're at, to identify their blind spots. Where can I go from here? So I will share that with you at the end. I believe it's 15 questions. It's a 6-point rating scale, and it's really a self-reflection tool. So I encourage you all to use that as well. Okay. How is it used? We talked that it's used for self-assessment. Where are your strengths? Where are your areas for growth? The intent is that let's go back here. The intent is that it will also be used for supervision and training. That is an area where a lot of people are not incorporating this into their supervision and their training. So if you are a supervisor, or you are in a peer group, definitely encourage all the support that you can get. Use this, bring it up. I'd like to go over this with you. It's validated, so it is backed by research. So it's not just someone decided to make up these questions. It has been validated. And why we should use this, the goal and the hope and the research is showing that it enhances our relationships with clients, specifically those that are from different backgrounds than us. It reduces our microaggressions, and it's going to be more culturally responsive. That's what we want for our clients, right? And we're just being really mindful, and we're being really targeted of how we do that. So I will share that with you all a little bit later. Okay. So let me explain a little bit more about what virtual peer group supervision looked like. Anyone could do this. I see it all the time in different groups on different listservs. Would anyone be interested in starting a peer consult? Weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, right? I will tell you, there are so many people out there that want to talk and grow their skills and have strong peer connections. So what did we do? The groups were quite small. There was 4 to 5 of us in a group. I ran 2 separate groups for my research. And the participants reported they really liked these smaller groups because it felt more personal, it felt more intimate. Some people report that they have group supervision and it can be huge, right? Maybe 10, 15 people, and they've just felt like it wasn't really an intimate, consistent environment to have these conversations. When you're doing cultural humility work and talking about these tough topics, you want a group you trust, and you want it to be consistent. You don't just want people popping in and out here and there, because you're not going to feel vulnerable and you're not going to feel comfortable sharing. So we met for extended period of time so that we all had one chance to be the presenter of a case. Some days we just open the floor. Who has a case to present today? Right? So before we even presented cases, though, this is what I really liked about it. We all engaged in a reflection question. And they were based on these 5 R's of cultural humility. So we did a question on reflection. We did a question on respect. We did a question on regard, relevance, and resiliency. In a moment, I'm going to just share with you what each of our topics were. And we would say, let's take 5 to 10 minutes, think about it, and then open the floor. Does anyone want to share? People really enjoyed this because you could share if you want, or you could just listen to your peers. But people got more comfortable and most people shared by the end. So here's the 5 R's questions that we started each of our week with a different question. The first was reflect on a recent interaction with someone of a different identity and how it challenged your preconceived notions. What's really good about these questions too is it makes you really think. There's so few times in a work week when we're seeing clients, we're just back to back to back to back that we have time to stop and think. The second week 2 was respect. Recall a situation where you showed or compromised respect for identity differences and how you addressed it with cultural humility. The third was regard. Think of a time recently you valued another person's identity and demonstrated positive regard, reflecting your commitment to cultural humility. Relevance. Describe how someone's identity influenced your approach and demonstrated your cultural humility in a recent interaction. Resiliency. Reflect on a challenging interaction where your resilience in maintaining cultural humility was tested and what you learned from this experience. So we just jotted down our ideas and we thought about it. And they're very similar, but it really was great because it gets you thinking. It's like, when have I done this? So these are also questions you might want to bring into your case conceptualization, your meetings with supervisors, conversations you're having, right? And always approaching from a place of positive regard. Like, a lot of times we would be embarrassed or not feel safe. The safe space is really important. I have not touched on that enough. We worked really hard together to create a safe space. It's not going to be a great situation if you don't feel safe emotionally, clinically to share. We created this safe space so that we could dive deeper into this. I can imagine if you didn't feel comfortable, you're going to not dive deep into these answers. So use these. If you are like wanting to become a better supervisor, or you're just wanting to be a better clinician, you can self-reflect on these. You don't even have to discuss ever with anyone, but they're just good questions to get people thinking. So you will also have access to this too. And I encourage you to just think about these. What I liked is I'm now in private practice. I don't get weekly supervision. I have to seek it out myself. And I really enjoyed having a dedicated space once a week for an hour to think about these things. Okay, so those are the 5 R's. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to do a case example, and I'm going to like ask you some questions and we're going to self-reflect here. Oh, someone said, what is a safe space? Often when individuals are having feelings regarding this topic, the space gets labeled unsafe when in actuality, it is often the lack of humility. Yes, I think that was the thing is we went into this, and because it was not a power dynamic, it was peers, all different levels, all different geographic, all different ages, backgrounds. We set ground rules that like, this isn't going to work unless we're all vulnerable with each other, right? I might say something that offends you. Please, like, let's call each other out on these things in a respectful way because we're here to grow. And I think that's why it was quote unquote a safe space, because we were culturally humble. We were trying to learn a lot of different things. What was actually super cool too is everyone kind of was in just by chance, different backgrounds. Like mine was with children, someone else's was in LGBTQ mental health, someone else's was in the hospital, someone else's was in hospice. It was just, we got to hear so many different perspectives, and we were curious and we were respectful. So it is very hard to create a safe space, but you have to be really mindful. And I do agree people call places safe spaces, and they're in actuality not, right? It's just how many of you have been in a place and they're like, this is a safe space, and you absolutely do not feel comfortable sharing, right? Like a lot of times the word's just thrown around, but you truly have to find a space that feels safe and comfortable for you. Okay. So let's talk about this case example. And this is an example of an implicit bias and a misattunement. Scenario: clinician works with a middle-aged Latina client who reports feeling stressed and tired. The clinician focuses primarily on coping skills for stress management, but does not explore how the client's financial insecurity, immigration status, and role as a caregiver for her parents intersect to create a sense of chronic overwhelm. What happens? The client feels the clinician doesn't really get it, but she doesn't verbalize this and she begins canceling sessions. Right? Signs that maybe there's some misattunement. Clients drop off. They start to miss sessions. They just ghost you, right? Like, why? They just never come back. There's probably a reason that happens. And when that happens, like a lot of times we get defensive and our egos hurt, but maybe we should instead do some self-reflection. Like, where was the misalignment here? Were we not a good fit? Did I miss some cues? And you can ask clients this, like, am I missing the mark anywhere? How are you feeling about the session? Something else that I discovered in my research was a lot of times we as clinicians don't ask for feedback enough from clients, and we just assume we're doing a good job. We just assume we're just the best clinician for this person, and that's not always the case. So we have to sometimes put our egos aside and like realize where we're missing the mark a little bit. So what can we learn from this? When we overlook these intersections, so socioeconomic status, cultural intersections, we might be misattuned and not even know it, right? We might go unnoticed, trust is eroding. And then let me just pose this question here. If this were to happen, we miss the mark, we're misattuned, what do you think this is going to do for this person in the future when they want to go to therapy? Do you think they're going to like have a really good positive sense of the therapeutic experience? Probably not. Right? Let me see. I'm just checking some of the questions here. Oh, someone's saying, shouldn't you start where the client is? Yes, but also we should, in a really good assessment and throughout the process, be digging a little deeper. I always say this too, clients aren't going to probably share something that we don't ask them about, right? So in just a moment, I'm going to give you some language you can use to dig a little bit deeper, because they might be like, I don't want to share this. They're probably feeling the same uncomfortable awkwardness that we are, right? I will be the first to admit this. There's been many times I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to so badly ask about something, and I'm like, I don't feel confident in myself to do it. How many of you have ever been in a scenario where there's something you want to ask, you want to dig a little bit deeper, but like you just don't go there because maybe you're not confident enough? We're humans. This happens, right? Or how many of you have ever felt like, I don't want to offend this person by asking this? That's happened to me too. I'm like, I'm going to say the wrong thing. Everyone's saying yes. Being culturally humble encourages you to ask the questions. And guess what? If there's harm that's done, you repair that harm, because that goes a long way to repair versus ignoring. So it's a vulnerable space you have to work from. So here are some examples of prompts you might use when you are meeting with clients. How many of you feel that, and this could be an agency you work in. Also, I was finding this, so I hope that others are in this situation. I was realizing the questions that I was asking on an intake, I was using an intake my agency used, did not go deep into identity work at all. How many of you feel that like it's very basic? Like, what is your racial background? Do you have a religion you follow, right? Like, yes, I could get the surface level, but like I did not ask any questions about disability, visible or invisible. I did not ask any questions about, I'm trying to think some of those other things. identities outside of gender or sexual orientation, right? How many times have we just told clients, fill out this intake form and that's all the information we get, right? There's so many even layers of ourselves that are not obvious to the outside that we need to dig a little bit deeper into, right? So here's a question, an example of a prompt you might use. What systematic or identity related factors? Oh, these are for you to think about, and then I'll give you prompts in a second. So these are things to think about. What systematic or identity related factors might be impacting this client's experience, right? We're not going to assume, we're going to ask, but be thinking about it. Be asking yourself, how can I ask about identity and intersectionality in a way that feels respectful, even if it feels awkward? Sometimes it's awkward, but that's when the good work happens, is when we're putting ourselves out there and we are being vulnerable and modeling that for our clients. But always being respectful, not just asking because you're being nosy, but approaching from a place of curiosity so you can strengthen the therapeutic relationship. Okay. Here are some ways you can approach it and question starters for you. So definitely think of ways you might want to tailor this to your own work. I want to make sure I understand all the parts of your identity that matter to you. Would you feel comfortable sharing which ones are most important? What do you guys think of that one? Does that feel safe? Like it's encouraging them? If they might say, I don't feel comfortable, right? That's fine. That is a boundary that they set, right? But notice here, it's not, tell me about this. Would you feel comfortable sharing this with me? Which ones are most important to you? Not assuming because you look a certain way that it's important to you, but which ones feel most resonant to you? Okay. Second one, sometimes different aspects of who we are overlap in ways that affect how we experience life. Can we explore how that might be true for you? Or do you want to explore this aspect of your identity a little bit more? I've sometimes had clients that are like, I am so sick of people assuming that I am here to talk about this very big identity of mine. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about this other thing, right? Never make assumptions. The third one, these questions might feel a little personal, but I ask because it helps me support you in a way that fits your experience. Is that okay with you? I like this third one because it's saying, I'm not trying to be intrusive just to be intrusive. It's because I want to support you in getting consent. Is that okay with you? Notice here the wording is really mindful and safe, and it opens the door if they should want to go there. Does that make sense? Okay. I hope that you will see these really, like I had to do a lot of like, my words are not this good. I had to sit with it a long time and like think of these prompts. But I'm like, I need to use this more in my work. I really need to be more mindful of when I'm talking with clients, asking in a respectful way, but also opening the door to talk about it. Yeah, someone said the first two feel a little clinical. You definitely would need to tailor it. Like with a kid, I'm not going to say this, right? Or someone that is not maybe very clinically minded, or they are a little wordy. So tailor them in a way that feels best for you and your population. Sometimes I have very analytical people that like really like the big terms and whatnot, and they get it. So just tailor this to your population and how it's going to work for you. And these are just examples. Always use ones that speak to you. Okay, so we've talked about all this. What can you do? If you are in peer supervision, use these prompts to discuss identity, be thinking of it. Always have this in the back of your mind. If you are in formal supervision, maybe you are just the supervisee. Some of you said you have wonderful supervision. Bring these topics in, say, I went to this CE and I'd like to explore this a little bit more. I think this is a weakness of mine, or I want to dive deeper into this aspect of my clinical work. So invite supervisors to help you examine this, and maybe you do it together. Maybe it is a reciprocal relationship. Include client intersections in your formulation and treatment planning. Even if you only took one thing away from today, I hope it's that you're just thinking of a little bit deeper about culture and identity when you're thinking about clients. Use it as a training tool. I'm going to share with you my intervention. It's called an intervention package. So if you wanted to bring these prompts and like replicate what I did in my research, you can share this. I'm not a gatekeeper of this. I want more and more clinicians to be culturally humble. So I think more people need to do this work. And then treat this topic as the first step, and like always be exploring and evolving in your work as a culturally humble and culturally curious practitioner. So bring this into your spaces and share with others. I think it's really important work.